It's Christmas in March for Chicago Bears fans. Ryan Poles pulls off the trade down from 1 to 9 in a move that gives the team a great draft haul and sets this franchise up with a very bright future.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lorin Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. We've got a special emergency edition of the podcast for you today. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at Locked On Bears. You can like Locked On Bears on Facebook. Join the Locked On Bears Facebook group for more Bears talk. And make sure you hit the subscribe button on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Appreciate those of you tuning in. This is a live stream of the Locked On Bears podcast here on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, but it's going to go up in our podcast feed for all of our podcast listeners as well. So I'll keep an eye up on the YouTube chat here, and if you hear me reference some chat, that's where it's going to be coming from on the show today. But on this podcast, we're going to talk about the draft haul, the big haul the Bears are bringing in from the Carolina Panthers to move down to that number 9 overall pick. We're going to talk about DJ Moore, the new wide receiver, as a part of that draft trade haul in this mix and how that comes into this equation and what that means for the Bears moving forward and how this whole trade now sets the stage for free agency and the NFL draft and what the Bears are going to do when they have that money to spend starting on Monday, and then, of course, when they're on the clock with that 9th overall pick. But it's hard to understate how critical this move is for this franchise, how this allows the team to have so many more resources to really kind of cash in on everything that they earned, really, with that number 1 overall pick, right? We knew that that was going to eventually become a great resource for them in some way, shape, or form, whether that became a player with the number 1 pick or whether that became, a trade down like this or became something else that would bolster the future of this franchise. But when you see them go out and get, with the 9th overall pick, a second-round pick this season, number 61, a first-round pick in 2024, a second-round pick in 2025, and then, of course, the wide receiver, DJ Moore, that is such a nice haul of picks that are going to set this team up for so much success. This is going to build the foundation of young players around Justin Fields and for the future, right? Still at number 9, which we'll talk about in a little more specifically, you're still going to get a very, very good player. Maybe it's not Will Anderson or whoever you wanted with the number 1 overall pick. Maybe it's not that level of player, although we have certainly seen plenty of times when the player drafted number 1 overall, especially non-quarterback, is not the best player drafted in their draft class, and that there are players drafted in the top 5 and in the top 10 who end up being even better than the player that goes first overall. So there's that's not even to say that like the Bears are no longer have a good shot at any sort of, great young player as a result of having traded down in this way, but they're still going to be able to get a really good player that could still be one of the best players in this draft class, and you have an extra second-round pick to get an immediate player there to pair with your own second-round pick. So that's another shot at perhaps 3 week 1 starters with those first 3 picks is a very real possibility. And certainly if not week 1 starters, 3 guys that need to be long-term successful pieces of this Bears offense. Plus you have another first-round pick next year from a Panthers team that does not look obviously free agency and the draft still to come, does not look poised to be any kind of major contender this year. So it should be another high-level future first-round pick and to go with the Bears' own first-round pick and then a second-round pick the following year gives you so many swings for the fences here, so many bites at the so-called apple. Because when it comes to the NFL draft, right, so often these picks are a little bit more of a crapshoot, or we just, you don't always know what you're going to get with those picks. It can be a little bit more of a lottery ticket. And so the more chances you have, the more swings you can take towards the fences there, the more likely that one or more of them are going to end up hitting and being really successful players. it's no guarantee that all these picks that Ryan Poles acquired will be big-time, major, successful players. There's no guarantee that all these picks are going to pan out, but certainly it's all the ammunition you could possibly want to try and build up everything around this Bears team. And it's certainly going to be on Ryan Poles to now take advantage of those picks and hit with those picks, because a bunch of draft picks are great if you are able to use them properly. And of course, you can have all the draft picks in the world. If none of them are any good, then it limits your ability to kind of, rebuild your franchise in that way and kind of be, the type of organization and the type of team direction that you really, really want to see this team start working towards. And so that's why this feels like such a monumental time and a monumental decision, a monumental moment in the Bears franchise, because you've got all this ammunition now that can start to fill in all the cracks, right? This is where you start to build out more young talent on the offensive line and the defensive line and at linebacker. I mean, across the board, these are the players in the draft that Ryan Poles talks about. This is how you build your franchise. You build through the draft, you draft and develop, and maybe you augment that in free agency and add other players and starters there that we're going to get to next week. That all gets a little bit overshadowed with a trade like this, but still, it's something that sets that foundation now both around Justin Fields and beyond to kind of give them the young players that are supposed to be the cornerstones of your franchise. That this is the kind of guys that need to be here for not only their rookie contract, but a second contract after that. Being those kind of long-term pieces, all coming from just one first-round pick, turning into so much more for this Bears team. Also turning into, pun intended, so much DJ Moore at wide receiver. The Bears going out and getting a proven 1,000-yard-a-year type weapon for Justin Fields, who can be that number one option on the outside to pair with Darnell Mooney and Chase Claypool. And to me, DJ Moore is a really critical part of this deal, not only because he's a good player, but how he sort of fits with the rest of the trade compensation. We'll explain how that math kind of works out with Moore in exchange for maybe fewer draft picks than they would have got had they not included DJ Moore, but him being well worth whatever they may have had to sacrifice on the draft compensation end. That's next on Locked On Bears. The Locked On Bears podcast is brought to you by our friends at Built Bar, the makers of the world's best tasting protein bars, because Built Bars don't taste like regular protein bars. They taste like candy bars. They're soft, easy to chew, and really good for you, covered in 100% real chocolate. It's the perfect combination of sweet, delicious, satisfying your sweet tooth while also being a positive for your health. They're a really important part of my daily nutritional regimen. I eat one literally every day because they taste so good. They come in a bunch of delicious flavors. You can find them all at built.com, or you can get them quicker in person by running into your nearest Walmart over in the pharmacy section. They have 4-bar boxes of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. Or if you're close to a Sam's Club, you can run in there as well and get a 13-bar box of two of my favorite flavors, brownie batter and churro. Those are two that I reorder all the time. Trust me, you got to try them for yourself, because tasting is believing. And once you do it, you will thank me later. It's hard to overstate also how important DJ Moore is as a part of this trade, because we had heard Ryan Poles talking to the media about how, he's got offers. He's talking to teams about 2 future first-round picks, and the Bears did not get 2 future first-round picks. They got one in 2024 and then a second in 2025. And I can't help but wonder if the DJ Moore addition is part of, not the sole reason, but part of what brought that trade compensation, instead of being 2 first-round picks, being a future first and a future second, to, I think a worthwhile sacrifice to get a wide receiver like DJ Moore, because this is not a free agent class that's really going to have much to love at the wide receiver position. We've talked about it a little bit, well, more than a little bit here and there on the podcast, that, your top options in free agency this year are what? Jacoby Myers, Juju Smith-Schuster. He's been a 1,000-yard guy before, but it's been a little bit and more of a slot option. And then like Odell Beckham Jr., who we know has been very, very good, but is coming off of a very severe injury, and who knows exactly what level he's going to return to, but B, and perhaps more importantly, Odell Beckham does not seem like the kind of player who's in a position right now to want to return to come to the Chicago Bears, because he seems to be looking more like chasing a Super Bowl ring, looking for a really like true Super Bowl contender right now. Seems to be his ideal path. That's not to say the Bears won't be better this season than they were last season. Certainly they're not going to pick number one again, and can very well push for a playoff spot. But the Bears don't seem like the destination. A young, growing, ascending team does not seem like the kind of spot that someone like Odell Beckham would go to. And so if you're Ryan Poles and you're looking around saying, I need to find a number one wide receiver, or I need to find a difference maker at wide receiver, you're not going to find him in free agency, so your options are trade or the NFL draft. And right now, you have DJ Moore now as that trade option who's in the building and can be that 1,000-yard go-to playmaker receiver. And you do still have the option to take one in the NFL draft if you really want to load up at wide receiver. A lot of Bears fans point to Jackson Smith-Njigba from Ohio State or Quentin Johnson from TCU as guys that could be there and should be there at the number 9 overall pick and could be potential targets at that spot. We still have a long way to go with free agency and how the rest of the board and how the rest of the roster is filled in to get to that point. So it feels to me like probably not going to use a first-round pick on a wide receiver after trading for DJ Moore. It feels like trading for DJ Moore is your equivalent of first-round pick on a wide receiver because he fills that role. And then you can feel pretty comfortable about Darnell Mooney being your number 2 wide receiver and Chase Claypool being your number 3-ish wide receiver. And you still have Velus Jones. You like the upside you have there. And there's still time to add more depth players at that. But Moore, Mooney, and Claypool as a 1-2-3 combination, pretty darn good. You can feel like you got yourself a decent little wide receiving core there. Plus, you add Cole Kmet and whatever else the Bears want to add in terms of pass catchers this offseason. They're in a really good spot. I also think they're in a really good spot financially with DJ Moore. This was a player that there were trade rumors about during the season as far as whether or not the Panthers wanted to move on from him then and whether or not the Bears were interested in him then. But the Bears take on his contract at a really good time. When the Bears have all this salary cap space, but also when his contract is well structured for financial flexibility for Chicago into the future. That this year, DJ Moore has about a $20 million cap hit, which is, up there among wide receivers, but we might see guys like Juju Smith-Schuster even start to push that, and we certainly see the top-end wide receivers make a lot more than that. It feels like $20 million for DJ Moore is a very appropriate amount for a guy that has 3 straight seasons of it being an 1,100-yard receiver before this past season in Carolina when, the crap hit the fan and the offense went down the toilet and no one was producing in that offense. No one looks, I think, at this year and blames DJ Moore for his slight reduction in production compared to the rest of his career. But he's 26 years old. You get him at $20 million this year. Next year, $16 million cap hit. 2025, $16 million cap hit. Those are going to be a steal for DJ Moore as a 1,000-yard wide receiver. If he continues at just the same pace he's been throughout his career, $16 million for him the next 2 seasons after this one is a great value because we're going to see, again, Juju Smith-Schuster might be in the $16 million range this year. Jacoby Myers might be in the $16 million range this year. So essentially the Bears are getting DJ Moore at a below market value contract, getting him as their sort of free agent signing at wide receiver and didn't have to give up anything additional to go out and get him. Maybe they got slightly less in draft pick compensation because they didn't get that 3rd first-round pick in there, that 2025 first, but I'm more than willing to make that cutback from 2025 first to 2025 second and have DJ Moore in there. Like if that was the flip, right, I would absolutely take this over that. It's a deal because you're still getting the 2024 first, you're still getting the extra 2nd-round pick this year in addition to number 9, and it's a great trade for the Chicago Bears. It really is. And Moore fits the bill perfectly for the kind of thing they need on the outside. Sure, maybe he's not Devontae Adams. Maybe he's not even a younger version of DeAndre Hopkins. But he's instantly an upgrade for the Bears at a big position of need where the Bears had very limited opportunities to upgrade that position through means other than a trade or picking a rookie in the NFL draft. And that's the thing. Moore is still 26 years old, so you have a bright future in front of him. But he's also instant plug and play. You're not waiting for a rookie to develop and get up to speed and sort of grow into their role in the NFL. Boy, DJ Moore is going to be able to do some damage this season for the Chicago Bears. This big trade now sets the stage for Ryan Poles to enter in free agency with a little bit more certainty about what his future is going to hold. Now he knows he's not going to get Will Anderson with that number 1 overall pick. He doesn't know who's going to be on the board at 9, but he has a better sense of where he's going to pick. Well, he knows where he's going to pick now, and so has a better sense of what players might be available where he's picking. And now he knows, now that can shape the decisions he's going to make in free agency. Oh, and he knows he has a true top wide receiver as well for Justin Fields. So we'll start looking forward at how this trade affects the immediate plans that start Monday with the free agent tampering period next on Locked On Bears. We don't have all the answers as to what's going to happen next for your Chicago Bears, but we have a lot more clarity on how the direction of this franchise is going to go. We talked on Friday's the regular Friday Locked On Bears podcast about where the Bears might spend their money in free agency. And we talked about how we didn't think they were probably likely to spend a lot at wide receiver. That these wide receivers are expensive and not that good. And it's not really a worthwhile investment to spend top dollar on a free agent wide receiver class that's just not very strong at all. But then B, that they might be able to draft one in the first round anyway, and that their main way of getting a true wide receiver upgrade would have to be via trade. And so, boom, here it is. And now it feels pretty certain, right? The Bears are not going to go out in free agency and sign any kind of big name wide receiver. Perhaps there could still be a depth signing there, a number 4, number 5 type. I mean, right now, under contract, your receivers are Moore, Mooney, Claypool, Equinemius, St. Brown, Velus, Jones, and that might be your 5 this season. But you could easily see them get another Dante Pettis type, a real cheap guy. But that's really about it, right? They seem pretty set at wide receiver pretty well across the board. And like we were just talking about in the last segment, like even with the number 9 overall pick, I certainly wouldn't be upset by them taking a wide receiver at number 9, but it sure feels like you don't have to. You don't need to. And it feels to me like you would be better off taking a pass rusher or an offensive lineman, because those are going to be bigger needs where you can always take more depth at those positions, whereas wide receiver is a little bit more, I don't want to say settled, because you can always take more wide receivers too, but let's fill all the holes before we start adding more luxuries here. And that's where it feels like now we can really hone in the free agent focus on both the offensive and defensive lines. That's where the big money's got to go. When you got to spend this cap space, which DJ Moore takes up a certain chunk of, certainly, but go get a right tackle, go get a defensive tackle, go get an edge rusher. That's got to be kind of the big 3 priorities now with this trade in place. Because then, first of all, I think if you sign a right tackle like Mike McGlinchey or Juwan Taylor or whoever, then all of a sudden you don't really need to take one with that 9th overall pick either. Again, kind of like wide receiver, you could, and they could compete with Braxton Jones and maybe bump him to the bench, and you could have 2 really good bookend tackles for a long time. But I think they really like Braxton Jones and aren't going to be in a hurry necessarily to just, get rid of him and try and, make sure that they can't, solidify that spot. So it points to me as the ideal situation for the number 9 overall pick then is pass rusher, right? And I see Chris Pacomio in the live YouTube chat says Lucas Van Ness at number 9. And I think that feels to me like the direction that they're going to go. Maybe not. I mean, certainly Lucas Van Ness would be a fine pick there. I don't know, but I think they're going to have some different options there, right? Maybe a Tyree Wilson from Texas Tech. Certainly Lucas Van Ness also fits that bill as a definite Ryan Poles or Matt Eberflus style of big defensive end that you feel like you can also kick inside, which Lucas Van Ness straight up did at Iowa, playing the 3-technique defensive tackle position. You feel like he can give you some of that versatility at those spots. I mean, even a guy like Miles Murphy from Clemson might be in that conversation there, or Nolan Smith from Georgia potentially, or we can't rule out the possibility that Jalen Carter from Georgia falls all the way down to the number 9 overall pick because of his arrest and all the situations surrounding the drag racing and the death of a teammate and I think a staffer, very tragic. And I don't want to gloss over or make any, or not properly appreciate the severity and the seriousness of those incidents. But if the Bears trade down to 9 and get the defensive tackle from Georgia that they were maybe previously considering at number 1, that would be the absolute ideal situation. And I don't think there's a scenario in free agency where I wouldn't draft a pass rusher with that 9th overall pick, right? I agree with Luke Alter in the chat here on the YouTube live stream that I don't think Tyree Wilson will fall to number 9 either. I think I've heard specifically that some teams have Tyree Wilson even above Will Anderson on their draft boards. And so I'd be pretty surprised if he makes it out of the top, I was going to say top 5, but we'll probably see quarterbacks go 1, 2, 3 or even 1, 2, and 4. So might not be enough picks in the top 5, but certainly top 7. It'd be tough to see Tyree Wilson go. Will Anderson and Tyree Wilson are probably both pretty clearly going to be gone by that spot. But Van Ness, I think, would be a great selection there and a guy who would be a great fit on this defense. And as I was getting to, like, doesn't matter to me who you sign in free agency. All the pass rushers are on the board because you just need more of them. You know, go sign Javon Hargrave at defensive tackle. Go sign Marcus Davenport at defensive end. Go sign Dalvin Tomlinson at nose tackle. Sign all 3. They won't. They can't really afford to sign all 3, but sign all 3, and I'm still drafting a pass rusher in the first round. Like, you just can't have too many pass rushers, especially because, you know, we don't know exactly how good Dominic Robinson's going to be. We don't know exactly what Travis Gibson's ceiling is going to be. I don't need either of those guys to be starters right away or anytime soon. So go get 2 new defensive ends and 2 new defensive tackles between free agency and the NFL draft with the 9th pick, with now both of your second-round picks or even, you know, into the 3rd round and beyond. We can't rule out Kalijah Cansey, the defensive tackle from Pittsburgh. Kind of a smaller Aaron Donald is the, I think, unfair comparisons that he's getting, but same school, similar types of speed, even though the skill sets are a bit different and shouldn't set those expectations as high for Cansey. There's a lot to like with what the Bears can get at number 9. A lot of possibilities. And now that we know where the Bears are picking, we can start to hone in a little bit more on what that group of prospects will look like at number 9. You can be sure we're going to break those down on future episodes of the Locked On Bears podcast. But on Monday, we're going to start talking about free agency. We still have to talk more about DJ Moore and the skill set he's going to bring into this Bears offense from the Panthers. There's so much to talk about. That's why we had to do an emergency podcast and a live YouTube stream reacting to the news just as it happened. I appreciate you tuning in if you're watching on the live stream. I hope you'll hit that subscribe button on the Locked On Bears YouTube channel to keep up with all of our video podcasts. We're available wherever you find your regular podcasts as well, so there's no excuse not to keep coming back for more of your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. We'll be back for you first thing Monday morning with some kind of DJ Moore and free agent talk right around the corner. And of course, we'll be back with another opportunity to bear down.